Welcome, bakers, to today's show. We'll get started in just a second. I'm going to let everybody drop in. Let me know where you're logging on from and what you're baking today. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Awesome. Alrighty, so let's see. It is 12 o'clock. Actually, it's 12:01 on the West Coast. So now I am ready to start the show. I am so happy to see all of you. All right, today's show is awesome. I could not believe the questions that came in. Please, you guys, keep sending those questions. They're great. They help us all. So if you have a question, don't hesitate, send it in. Even if it's during the week, you can always DM me and I will put it into the magic notebook. Isn't it funny how in this digital age we have to go back to like old world tools to keep ourselves organized? Well, at least I do. If you work, mostly on your computer, but you have to have a notebook nearby, please put it in the comments. I'd love to feel less alone. I feel a little bit like a Luddite, but then a super techie girl at the same time. Alrighty, let's get started. So our first question came from one of our this baker posts beautiful product all the time. She is one of, I feel, our most energetic bakers. And her Instagram is Salty Sweet Bakes. If you follow her, you see her beautiful bakes throughout the week. And she had a really great question for me. She asked about a particular brand of flour. And that was a King Arthur flour that we don't see in the supermarkets. But many of you who I am sure, like me, haunt the King Arthur flour website know about. And it's their Sir Lancelot flour. And their Sir Lancelot flour is their high gluten flour. So some of you may be asking, all right, Colette, what's high gluten flour? I know bread, I know all-purpose, I know cake. What is this high gluten flour? Well, high gluten flour has the highest protein content of all the flours, and it is 13 to 14% protein content. So let me just put you in the picture of protein content. Cake flour is 6 to 8% protein. The rest of it is made up of starch, because it is flour, and then minerals, and then good additives, don't freak out, but additives like malt to help our products have a little bit more even browning. Then there is pastry flour, which we don't see very much. That's about a 7 to 9% protein content. But for us as home bakers, what we do see is a lot of all-purpose flour. And we have conversations a lot about all-purpose flour. Brands, bleaching, unbleaching, but all-purpose flour was basically created for the restaurant and hotel industry way back when. It's a blend of soft flours, lower protein flours, and higher protein flours so that they wouldn't have to have a ton of flour hanging around. And then the home baking market, the flour companies are not stupid, and they realized they could also sell this to home bakers who maybe didn't have a lot of time to bake or didn't want a bunch of different flours in their pantries. So all-purpose flour is between, I would say, 9 and 11.7%. But this Sir Lancelot that Salty Sweet Bakes asked about, her question was great. And I know I've said great like 5 times now. It's the word of the day. What can I tell you? We all do that. We all get a word of the day. Well, she asked, it's a higher protein flour. So of course we're going to use it for bread. That would be our choice. If we made a cake with this Sir Lancelot flour, it would be a super chewy cake. It wouldn't be soft or tender. even croissants made with this flour would be chewy. So the Sir Lancelot 14% protein content. It's good, it's great for bagels. Great for like a New York style type pizza dough where you really want that chew. Some people, I went on blogs, I read, I did a deep dive when that question came in, and there are folks who love it for their sourdough, but they're using it in part with like a really a good all-purpose flour, a little bit of strength, a little bit of less stronger flour. They're using it, oh, I got it, the word is blend, so they're using it as a blend, and you can do that. You can add, you can mix your flours up, bakers. And if you ever have questions about that, shoot me a message. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. So what are we talking here? We want to use a high gluten flour like the Sir Lancelot. And I found it's available through King Arthur. And if you don't see it on the website, give them a call. They have their Great Bakers hotline. And then I also saw it at an amazing source called Web Restaurant Store. Put it in the comments if you've ever heard of Web Restaurant Store. They are an online restaurant supply that anybody can shop with, and they had the Sir Lancelot flour, 50 pounds of it, pretty reasonable if you need to buy a 50-pound bag. Anyway, so what are we talking about? Sturdy. We're looking, when we use a flour like that, we're making sturdy loaves of bread, and we want that chew, like in a bagel. Now, okay, so I would use it for bagels. I would use it for rolls. I would use it for Kaiser rolls. I would use it for my hearth breads. I would blend it in my sourdough, and then, and I'll come to that comment, Andrew, in just a second. So where was I? So sturdy, chew, structure. All right? Where would we not use it? We wouldn't want it necessarily when we're making laminated doughs like croissant or Danish, because we want structure, but we want tenderness. Now, I will tell you, if you use a higher protein flour when making your laminated doughs, you might notice some really clean and beautiful definition in your layering or your laminations, but you will notice more chew. So, it's a trade-off. Experiment, try things. Keep good notes, bakers, because then you can refer back and know what you liked about a batch and what you didn't. So salty sweet bakes, I hope this helps. I think having a nice big bag of Sir Lancelot flour in your baker's pantry is a gift. I think that's awesome, but it's not used for every bread. And I also, just to piggyback and wind this down, I wouldn't use it for sweet doughs like cinnamon rolls and sticky buns or babkas, nor would I use it for brioche. I think a higher protein content would, our brioche would be a little bit on the sturdier side. For those of you who make brioche often, you know that, or maybe you just live by a wonderful bakery that makes it, you eat it all the time because one should, it's just so delicious. Maybe not the healthiest thing, but my God. You know that the crumb structure of brioche just pulls off, almost like sheets. Well, part of it is that we tend to use softer flours. When we make brioche, we might use a lower protein bread flour when we make brioche. We're not, and oftentimes, and my favorite flour, for those of you who watch my Craftsy classes, where I seem to just run through every laminated dough ever created, is King Arthur's all-purpose flour. I think that is the best mainstream flour we can get for our laminated doughs. Now, some of you may be ordering from Central Milling. That's centralmilling.com. That's a great place to get flours and find all sorts of super cool artisan breads. But for those of you like me shopping in the grocery store and more mainstream markets, I really feel King Arthur All-Purpose is the best for croissants and Danish. And yeah, croissants and Danish. Salty Sweet Bakes, I hope this answers your question. And then Andrew commented that he ordered from Web Restaurant Store during the lockdown when flour was super scarce, and they have great service. I concur, Andrew. I agree. They do have really wonderful service and great tools. That's webrestaurantstore.com. And I recommend, for pans, just awesome, really great. Nordic Ware, Chicago Metallic, very good, great brands, reasonable prices. All right, awesome. So we got that. Keyword, Sir Lancelot. I guess he was a sturdy dude, wasn't he? You know, maybe that's why they named the flour Sir Lancelot, because he was strong. I don't know. And then they call their cake flour at King Arthur Queen Guinevere because she was soft and delicate. Who knows? That's my thoughts for today. Now, I just read Andrew's comment, and Andrew actually sent in a question about our demo topic of the day, which is going to be bread pudding and how to make a great bread pudding. And more about that in a second. But Andrew, you asked a question I'm going to take right at the top, and that is, what about when we make savory bread puddings? Now, you've all seen them. They're really beautiful. We see them a lot in the winter time. Savory bread puddings with herbs and mushrooms and onions and maybe roasted garlic and some really beautiful savory combinations. Well, what do we do with the sugar? The answer is we leave it out. That's what we do. Or you could add a tiny percentage, but really when you're working savory, you don't need it at all. So, like when we make a quiche custard, which we're basically doing when we make a savory bread pudding, we don't put sugar into that custard. All right, so that's Andrew's question. And then just to finally come full circle, one final question before demo was about learning to laminate. And you know, that could be, wow. Bakers, you just give me so many ideas. You have no idea how many ideas I get from you guys. This baker wrote in about learning to laminate dough. Which dough would be a great place to start? And my answer all the time is croissant. Croissant is the easiest, and the reason is the dough is very straightforward. It is easy to mix. It's a short mix, which means we only mix it a couple minutes because we continue to develop the gluten as we complete our turns and laminate our dough. And then you go on to the fancier things like Danish. Actually, the Corona that we made, the one we made last week, yes, that would be a good starting point. But I think, croissants, I changed my mind. I can do that. I can change my mind from time to time. And then, if you would like, I can show you in a demo, put this in the comments if this is something you would be interested in. I can show you how to take something like a normal biscuit dough and how to laminate it and give it more layers and more flake, and then have a little bit of discussion about how we can apply the principles of lamination to our everyday doughs, especially when we want them flaky. Yes, Chef Santos, Sir Lancelot certainly did fool around with Queen Guinevere. All right, so that's it for questions. Again, I'm seeing yes on adding laminations to to the baking product that we just naturally want to be flaky, or, you know, the press release says, well, every biscuit should be flaky. Well, how do we build in more flake? And it'll be a perfect segue to all the pie conversations we're going to have shortly. All right, so we got salty sweet bakes, we got Andrew, we got our croissant question. I think we're good. Before I jump into the bread pudding, I'm going to lean over the table, which I fixed, by the way. The wheels broke off, but I got my hammer. I went to the hardware store. I asked them what to do. They told me. I bought the stuff, and woo, girl power moment. I fixed it myself. Awesome. All right, so let's see if I have any questions. I think we're good. Just comments. Just comments. So that's awesome. All right. Reset. I'm going to put my glasses aside because I don't really need them until I'm trying to read. What makes a great bread pudding? Patience. Patience, and I've already written the blog post. Patience and mindfulness. No, you don't have to queue up your Calm app to make a good bread pudding, but it's all in, there's a couple of things. Number one, choice of bread. When we make and I'm talking sweet bread puddings, when we make a sweet bread pudding, we want to use either a neutral bread, or you could use a bread that if you have, first of all, this is all about leftovers. I did bake a loaf of bread for this demo because I didn't have enough neutral breads in the freezer. I had too many savory breads in there. And I will include my bread pudding bread recipe on the blog post because it went together really quick and easy. So you need a neutral bread or a slightly sweetened bread. Baguette works well. French bread works well. Neutral, anything neutral. Brioche is great. Challah is off the charts. We should holler for challah for bread pudding. What I recommend, if you're a bread pudding fan, and by the way, the request for this demo came from one of our bakers, Cyrus, because this is one of his wife's favorite desserts. So we want to get him on the track of just an awesome, awesome bread pudding. So Lydia, this is for you. Cyrus, I hope you're watching. And if not, you can catch it on the archive. But this is to make a great bread pudding. Moist, good flavor throughout, all of it. All right, so the bread is neutral. Look at this. This is like milk bread. It doesn't get any more neutral than this. And you can buy your bread. You don't need to make it. We're not going to go all crazy. Now, you also want to cut it or tear it into bite-sized pieces, all right? A lot of times we get too big when we prepare the bread. And you want to have, so I'm going to show you. You can all see this. So I've got my little slices of bread, and I'm going to keep the crust on because I want that balance. One thing about golden brown crust, it helps balance the flavor of our bread. So what I'm doing, I'm cutting these in half. I'm using a serrated knife. I cut every half in half, and then I give it a quarter turn, and I do that again. Okay? So where things get screwy is if the ratio to custard is not enough for the bread that we're using. So I weighed out, actually, I didn't weigh it out. My loaf of bread weighed 1 pound. So I know if I cut up all these bread cubes, I'm going to have 1 pound. It's just like nuts, bakers. If you weigh out, and you are all weighing, no cups, blah, 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 bad. when you weigh out nuts, they are going to weigh the same whole as they do after you chop them. So a whole loaf of bread, if I can keep it in the bowl, is going to weigh the same cut up as it does whole. Okay, any questions about that? Put them in the comments. All right, so that's done. And if you want to tear it apart, fine. If you want to, that's a fun thing. That's a good task for little kids to do, to tear apart. Well, depends, maybe school age. I think my son would have probably eaten half of it, but so yes, so use your judgment who you get to sous chef for you. All right, now the next thing, you've got options. Next thing we're going to do is make the custard. So the custard can be made in the mixer. You can whisk it by hand, or if you have one of these bad boys, it works great. Well, I don't know, boy, girl, immersion, I don't care, whatever it is, but it is, immersion blenders work very well, and if you're doing some serious baking, they're a great investment. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to combine our milk, and the nice thing about this recipe is it doesn't use cream. A lot of times, especially these days, we're trying to be healthier. It's like I really don't want to buy cream and then have to think about, well, now what am I going to use the other half for? I always have milk. That's one thing I always have. So I'm going to, my sugar, and then my eggs. I really don't like to make noise, like mixer noise or machine noise on the show. So I'm going to use a sturdy whisk. All right? And then I'm going to add, I'm going to get it started. And then I'm going to go ahead, then I'm going to add, I've got spices to add. And I've got vanilla. The other thing, do not skimp on the vanilla, because that's another problem with bread puddings, is bakers you'll get a recipe off the internet and it does not have enough vanilla or vanilla bean paste. So you got to make sure that it has enough. We are using 2 tablespoons. That's almost, it's an ounce of vanilla that's going into this. Okay? So I'm adding my vanilla. And then it's cinnamon and nutmeg is going in. And then a little bit of melted butter. You notice this technique I've got? I do it all the time, where I roll the handle of the whisk between my palms. And in doing that, I'm almost like this thing, but I'm me-powered. And it works really, really well, but you have to have a tall container like this. I found this at Ross for $4 on the clearance shelf. So bakers, when you're TJ Maxxing to the max, or you're at Marshall's or Ross, do not neglect that housewares aisle. You can find a lot of good stuff. Well, this butter is not melted. It's like this. So I'm going to nuke it quick. Hold for 1 minute. Not a minute. This is fine. Great. So the butter, you're like, why is she adding melted butter to this? That butter in here makes it so we don't have to use heavy cream or half and half. All right, this looks great. I'm going to just do a check. Yeah, all right. Now the next thing that's going to happen And you notice I'm using deep bowls, deeper bowls. Whatever you have, you know, it doesn't matter what they're made out of. And I really got a nice mix on this. And in it goes. All of it goes. Okay? And you're going to take your spatula and you are going to scrape every bit down. You're going to pretend you work in a French pastry kitchen where they will yell at you if you don't scrape the bowls absolutely clean. I know Chef Santos is in the audience, and he worked in many a French kitchen, and when we taught together at Cordon Bleu, he'd always say that. I must see steel, because that's what his employers said to him. All right, bakers, custard and bread are now married together. And my hands are clean. I'm going to get in here and I'm going to toss the bread cubes and the custard, and I'm going to push down so the bread is submerged. Okay? And then I'm going to set it aside. And I'm going to set the timer for 45 minutes. Okay? It's going to soak. That'll be almost 1:15. It's going to soak for 45 minutes. After 40, and periodically while I'm tidying the kitchen and uploading the show to the archive and then sharing it, I will, because I always do that, bakers. If you miss the show, I always put it up on Instagram so you can watch it later. I will keep pushing down so that every cube of bread gets fully soaked. This is the key. You can't just toss it, throw it in the baking pan, which I have right here, and then pop it in the oven. It's going to have dry areas, and that's where our bread pudding goes off the rails. Now, let's talk pans, because it's fun. The size recipe that will be published on the website under recipes and blog posts it'll go live early Monday morning, will serve 12, maybe 16 people if they've had a big meal already. So 13 by 9 inch pan, really greased. Look at this. And it's not spray, it's not cake goo, it's butter. All about the butter. You can use the butter wrapper. I don't care. If you're saving those, that's great. But make sure, can you see? Like a film, a serious film. Okay? And then after 45 minutes, I'm going to transfer this mixture into the pan, scrape every bit of custard on top of it, and then I'll have preheated the oven. So here's the deal. We're going to preheat to 350, load it in the oven, and then drop to 325 for about 40 minutes. But it is not going to be open. Before you put it in the oven, you're going to butter a piece of foil. Shiny side gets buttered, and the pan look, I'm almost out. You are going to crimp it. It's going to have a nice, tight little buttered foil lid. And why are we buttering it? Just in case the foil makes contact with the pudding. If it's buttered, when you gently peel back the foil, you're not going to rip off the top of your pudding. Okay? So you could see, like this is 13 by 9 inch too, but it's more narrow. So you could see where maybe the foil might rip off. And you're thinking, well, why am I covering it, Colette? I haven't covered bread puddings before. You're covering it because we don't want any custard to evaporate. That's another problem with bread puddings. And oh my God, if I had $5 for every bread pudding that I made when I was working in hotels and restaurants, I don't know, I'd have a small island somewhere. So this really works. 40 minutes covered, and then you're going to check it. And I have a temperature for you, bakers. So if you have an instant read thermometer, I know we use this all the time, and then it should be 170 right in the center. Also, you can press down on the surface or take a spoon, don't burn yourself, and it should feel firmish. That's a new word for today, firmish, and no liquid should be spurting up. By the way, same test for a quiche. We don't want to see like liquid because that means the eggs they haven't cooked enough. So 170, firmish to the touch. Then, okay, we like beautiful caramelized tops on our bread pudding, right? Working on pastry kitchens, I've actually grabbed my torch, had nice little individual bread puddings, we'll talk about that in a second, and actually burned the top a little bit so that they looked more caramelized. Restaurant ovens are notoriously uneven, so sometimes we had to do things. Well, how are we we've covered this, so you're going to uncover it, and I'll have all the photos in the recipe so you see. It's going to be pale. It's not going to be browned because we covered it to conserve the custard. So the oven, you're going to turn it up to 425. This can sit, it can just sit while the oven preheats, and then when the oven is at 425, you put this back in with no cover, close to the top. The oven is on bake, but we want to bake up here so that that heat rises. It's on the bottom. It rises up the sides of the oven to the roof of the oven. Hot, 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 plops down on our bread pudding. You're going to set a timer for 8 minutes. Then you're going to look at it. If it's not evenly browned, you've got your oven mitts. You're going to give it a spin, and you're going to leave it in there for about 4 more minutes until it's a beautiful golden brown. Then you can serve it hot, you can serve it warm, you can serve it cold, but you're going to let it sit for 20 minutes at least before cutting. As far as sauces go, you can make a rum sauce, caramel sauce, fruit sauce, creme anglaise, and BTW. Do you know what vanilla ice cream is when it's melted? It's creme anglaise. So you can always serve this with ice cream. Also, if you want to add, I'm going to add some chocolate chips to mine because during the heat wave, all my chocolate chips melted together. So I kind of I broke them apart. They're not perfect, but they'll be fine in my bread pudding. You could add raisins. If you're using bread, like maybe panettone, maybe you get a panettone for the holidays and half of it kind of sits and stales a little bit. Cut that up. And if it has dried fruits in it already, great. As a matter of fact, one last thing and I'll let you go. Working in those hotels and in hotels, I used to freeze the product that was not touched or served to the guests that came back from the anything I could use for bread pudding for Sunday brunch, I would save from the pastry cart the untouched pastries, and I would save them, I would freeze them, and I use them for the Sunday brunch bread pudding. And at that hotel, we became known for our bread puddings. Ha! Last thing, you can bake them individual in little Pyrex custard cups, or little ramekins. And if you do that, I would recommend a little bit of a water bath and the foil and everything just to keep that moisture in. When we do smaller units, things can dry out and the bake time would be a little bit less. More 25 check rather than 40. Bakers, I have more to tell you, but we have to go for today. I think next week I'm going to piggyback onto Salty Sweet Bake's flour question and talk a little bit about bread flours, bread flours all-purpose, and how you, when you're standing in the baking aisle, can determine the protein content of a flour when there's nothing about it on the label. All right? If you'd like to see that, put it in the comments below. Enjoy your baking this week. Please make sure you get into the kitchen and bake something, even something simple. Because remember, bakers, what does baking do? It makes our lives sweet. See you next week. Bye.